Well, hello, I'm Janet Morana, Executive Director of Priests for Life, also co-founded the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, the largest mobilization of women, men, grandparents, siblings, and other family members wounded by abortion, but now after healed, speak of their regret. And of course, I'm joined today on our wonderful program by pro-life leader, Frank Pavone. Welcome to the program
great
again.
to be here again.
Great to have you.
And with our audience.
Exactly. And of course, chemical abortion is in the news, isn't it?
It is, more than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been dealing with it from the very beginning of Priests for Life. In fact, shortly after we started 30 years ago is when the FDA started trying to push for approval.
Right.
You know, Clinton was in office.
And I remember Dr. Bernard Nathanson warning us back then.
That's right.
As early as like 1994 saying, listen, RU486, it's going to take over surgical abortion. And people are going, what? He was right. He predicted it.
Well, I remember him in the late 80s going into the 90s. He was giving a talk called The Bioethical Challenges of the 1990s.
Right.
And he started saying things like this, chemical abortion. He also started saying things like genetic engineering and whatnot, and stem cells. He said, this is going to be the stuff of the headline news. And we said, what?
And it
lo
came
and
to
behold,
pass.
Yeah.
So, of course, this abortion pill has now hit the courts. And as you know, they're trying to hopefully take one of the pills off the market. And of course, the pro-abortion industry is fighting tooth and nail.
Yeah.
But we have a great friend of ours, of the pro-life movement, brilliant lawyer and founder of the Justice Foundation. Of course, we've been working arm in arm with him for many years. And we're going to talk about the latest challenges in the court involving these pills. So yes. Welcome to the program, Allan Parker, our dear friend. How are you doing?
Thank you, Janet. I'm doing great, blessed in the Lord, and excited about these cases and the opportunity to maybe stop abortion pill distribution in the United States.
So for our audience, why don't you explain, in case they haven't been tuning in to all these happenings, can you give them in a nutshell an example of what happened in Amarillo, Texas, in the lower court, and where we're going right now?
Well, there was a group of emergency room doctors who call themselves the the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. And that was from Hippocrates, who said two things that are really critical and that have been abandoned by the medical profession. One, do no harm. That's something doctors are supposed to do. Do no harm to the patient. And number two is don't give a woman a pessary or a drug that will induce abortions. And yet the medical profession sadly has gone away from that, though most doctors in America still do not want to perform abortions because they know it's taking the life of a human being. But sometimes they want to help a woman, or they feel she's in difficult circumstances. And as you know today, and that we're going to emphasize in these cases, there's tremendous damage to women from the pill, and there's a safe haven law. But anyway, these doctors sued the FDA, and they sued them a long time ago. And the FDA is supposed to have 300 days to respond, and the FDA took 6,000 days to respond to the doctors who were saying, we're emergency room doctors. We're seeing torrential bleeding in abortion patients who are taking these pills, nearly dying. They require hospitalization. And we and our clients in the hospitals are traumatized by it. But more so, we don't even know how to take care of it sometimes because the women are told to lie and tell us they're just having miscarriages when they're really having incomplete abortions. And about 2 weeks ago, April 7th, now 3 weeks, a judge in an Amarillo District Court, Judge Kasmerick, he looked at all the evidence. The FDA has violated the law. There's a federal law banning the distribution of drugs, and these pills are dangerous and more traumatic and distressing and produce more emergency room visits than surgical abortions do. Therefore, he said you cannot any longer distribute these drugs in America.
You know, let's pause there for a minute. You know, this is something, Janet, you'll recall, and Allan, from, like I said, from 30 years ago, we were noticing right from day one the FDA's atrocious behavior on this. I mean, even the length of time they took to respond is symptomatic of an agency that has acted in such disregard for women's health. They have cut corners. They have always pushed to make it easier and easier to use these dangerous, powerful drugs. And they have been like unresponsive to the concerns that we've been raising both legally and medically and psychologically. It's been the same tragic tune all the way through these decades. That's why it was so gratifying to see this judge finally recognize this in a court decision and say, hey, you know what? The FDA's been acting unlawfully.
Right. But then, Allan, this kind of made its way up to the Supreme Court, right? And this is where you come in. And I know you filed an amicus brief. Explain that.
But could we hold on one second? Yeah. Allan, let's focus for a minute on what the judge in Amarillo said. Let's give the people a couple of examples here of, he, in his ruling, he said, you know what, we've got to tighten up the requirements here. Can you walk us through that a little bit? We have to tighten up in very concrete terms. I mean, what are we talking about?
I urge you to send out both opinions, the district court opinions, and then it was appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and 3 judges on that court wrote an opinion that basically came to the same conclusions. They documented that this was a political decision. They didn't follow the law. This was promoted by a group called the Population Council. What they wanted to do was reduce the number of people in the world. They didn't do it for the benefit of women. They did it to reduce population. So every child and that's aborted is, in their view, a good thing. They positively want fewer people in the world. And if women are kind of the byproducts of that, well, that's just, as you say, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And that's the callous disregard. Even Mother Jones, by the way, not a pro-life organization, did a piece on the millions of dollars that these companies have been making. Actually, it's one company. Its name is Danco Laboratories, headquartered in the Cayman Islands, and it makes this pill in China. So China is helping to reduce the population of America by killing children. And that's all. That's a lot of that's in the briefs and in the opinion. He cited, and you may remember Justice Ginsburg once said that she was surprised that the government didn't fund abortion because she thought it was supposed to be reducing the numbers of different kinds of people. It was almost a very racist remark she made at one point.
Yes. Well. Now, for example, didn't the judge say something about the timing, how long into the pregnancy these drugs could be used? And he said, no, you're allowing it too late. Let's cut it back a little bit.
All right. Well, the first thing, the FDA is supposed to protect women and patients and consumers of medical products. So the doctors saw these problems, and they put in a petition to say this isn't safe. The FDA is required to give a response to that in 300 days. That's a pretty long time to do your studies, evaluate it, and give a response.
Almost a year.
And instead, the FDA just ignored it for 6,000 days. And then in the year 2000, that was the original approval. In 2016 and 2019, the FDA, in 2019, I believe it was, the FDA relaxed the standards, and the FDA did this under an emergency health provision for serious illnesses. And pregnancy is not a serious or life-threatening disease. That's what it is, disease or serious illness. That's and the court said, and even the Population Council in the beginning admitted, most of the women in the world will get pregnant at some time. They're not diseased people. They're pregnant mothers. But in order to use this rule and get a special emergency perspective without adequate studies, it had to be a life-threatening serious illness or medical condition. And pregnancy is not an illness or disease. So that's another reason and another way they went wrong. Then in 2016, they stopped requiring anybody to report adverse consequences. Because it's done on an emergency, kind of like the vaccine was, people will remember that. It's such a serious life-threatening. People were dying of COVID. That was a true emergency, and it was a disease. COVID was a disease. So they had emergency approval of something. Well, that's what they did to this non-disease called pregnancy, but they had to get rid of those kids. For the population council was worried there were too many people in the world. So anyway, then the FDA said, okay, after a while, don't report any more adverse consequences. Though we know that 100,000 to 250,000 women who used the pill had to go to emergency rooms to get treatment. How many treatments do you get from a doctor? You have to go back to an emergency room to get follow-up care. That's normal medicine. And then the court said, and both courts, the lower court and the Fifth Circuit, criticized. Then the FDA used the fact that, well, they stopped asking people to report it. Then 3 years later, they say, we haven't had any reports of complications. This is a very safe procedure. But the court said that's an ostrich in the head approach. That's not logical. You can't use the fact that you stopped asking people to tell you when there was a problem. Those were some of the ways it was politicized and pressured to the detriment of women. Great death.
Well, also they took away the requirement of the in-person visits with the doctor, right?
That's right, and that produces deaths. The court admitted, and the facts are undeniable. At least 2 women died last year from the abortion pill. Those are the ones we know of. Often the deaths may occur, and they may get treated as a complication of a miscarriage because the women are told to lie about it. And we put in our record, in our brief, the evidence from one of the distributors of the pill that they tell them, just tell the doctor you've had a miscarriage. So we expect that the number of miscarriages and perhaps death from miscarriage will go up because women are told to lie to the medical providers and tell them that's what it is, when really it's a chemical abortion causing the death.
So, Janet, you were asking Allan to walk us through. So the district court said, hey, let's tighten up the regulations here for the sake of the safety of these moms. Then it went to the Fifth Circuit, right? And then what did they say in reference to the Amarillo decision?
Well, that's where we filed our first brief, and we used the testimonies of women hurt by abortion. And we made the argument, and that the district court made as well, that the chemical abortion pill is more dangerous and traumatic. The reason it's traumatic to the women is that for 2 basic reasons. They become the abortion provider. They're given the pill, they go home and they take it, and they're administering the abortion to themselves. Before, it was a medical doctor telling them they should do it. Then the really graphic things that happens at home is the second pill forces contractions to expel the baby, and that's usually in the woman's home, her bedroom, or her couch, or her bathroom. And the cramping is like expelling a baby. It's like pregnancy. Large amounts of bleeding occurred. They're total maybe like a period. But the women who get deeply injured say they were passing big clots of blood. Several of them said, I thought I was going to die. And they see the baby. That's the traumatic thing. I remember the first time a woman called me asking for legal help, and she was practically sobbing and screaming on the phone because she said, my God, they lied to me. It's a baby. I've got the baby in my hand. And she was just sobbing. Can I bury my baby in my backyard? What do I do with my baby? She didn't want to flush that baby down the toilet. But that's where most of the babies go. And they feel, and all of us are exposed to the contamination of the sewage systems and knowing that that's in our water supplies. But the women are deeply traumatized. They see the baby, and it can produce lasting trauma. And I'm so glad to say that because of Silent No More Awareness's campaign, your website had 3 women who had chemical abortions, and their graphic testimony was allowed to be used, and we put that testimony into our brief.
Yes.
And then
Right.
that then went to, so the Fifth Circuit then said, well, we're going to allow the pill to be distributed. We're not going to say it was wrong at the beginning, but we're going to put the protections of a doctor's visit, which prevents ectopic pregnancies, which can kill a woman, prevents a woman from getting in this in mail and use it on a third trimester baby or something. There have been 20-week babies, 30-week babies who are aborted, and that's really difficult for a woman. You're basically giving labor to a dead baby at home, a big baby. And yet even at the 6 to 10 weeks when it's supposed to be used, it may be no bigger than a thumb, but a woman looks down at it. I've had the women say, look, it has hands and arms and a leg. This is my baby. And it's deeply traumatizing.
Yeah. So, Allan, right now, where is the case at this moment? Where are we?
It's going to be heard on oral argument at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans on May 17th. The Supreme Court, in an unsigned opinion, no written opinion actually, on an emergency relief, the Supreme Court just decided, well, we're going to preserve the status quo until we give the courts below more time to study the issue. And the trial judge had 6 months to study the issue, and he was absolutely certain that this procedure needed to be stopped for the protection of women and to follow the law. The Court of Appeals had about a week or two, and the Supreme Court had no more than a week. So it's a big decision, and often just to preserve the status quo, they will allow it to go. And they knew that the Fifth Circuit had already scheduled this for oral argument on May 17th. So that's where the big decision will occur. And we're going to file a brief again on behalf of all of those individuals. And I represent thousands of women injured by abortion through our project called Operation Outcry, which collects legally admissible written testimonies. And of course, many of those women are women who were Silent No More awareness women first, and then gave us their testimonies as well. So we've always worked together, and public outcry is important, and legal outcry to achieve justice in the courts is important also.
And so, Allan, May 17th, oral arguments happen, and then we'll have a period of kind of silence while they wait for a decision, right?
Yes.
And is it possible at that point they could take the drug off the market? I mean, if that's what we accomplish?
It is. And the beautiful thing, the easiest place for this group of judges and the Supreme Court to make a ruling would be that the abortion-inducing drugs may not be mailed in the United States Postal Service or in a common carrier. That's what the federal law says. It's called the Comstock Act. You may not send an abortion-inducing drug through the mail or a common carrier like FedEx or UPS. And the current constitutionalist, textualist, originalist judges, faithful judges who believe it's their duty to follow the law, not change the law to their liking, they easily could say, that's what the federal statute says. We're going to enforce the law. That's the duty of a judge. We don't need scientific experts on whether or not this abortion-inducing drug is good for women or they need it. That's not our role. That's Congress's role if it wants to change the law. But right now, the law says you cannot put this through the mail, and that would stop not only this current 2-pill regimen, but the backup plan that some states like New York, where they just take the more deadly and damaging pill and send it out one time. So there's a couple of drugs, but if the statute would ban them all because it says abortion-inducing drug. And that's, I believe, what a majority of the Supreme Court is most likely to say. The law is clear. Anybody can read it. You have to really come up with some crazy lawyer theory.
In other words, this is not a matter of these judges relitigating the decision of the lawmakers. That and this is important, I think, for people to understand. You come before the court with this case. There's a lot of medical facts. There's a lot of psychological facts. There's a lot of disputes on both ends. But it's like it's not a matter of, hey, judges, take a look at what the lawmakers did and tell us what you think. Like you're saying, Allan, the law is already there. The judge is going to say, hey, listen, I'm not going to enter into all these arguments back and forth. The people and their elected representatives already did so. I think also in light of the Dobbs decision that is now precedent and that these judges have to be looking to, and that says these matters are to be resolved by the people and their elected representatives, and the judges are not to put their policy preferences into this process. I think that adds to the likelihood that the judges will do exactly like you're saying and say, hey, wait a minute, the law is the law. Let's enforce
But
it.
if they say they can't mail it, I thought also there was also a part of the case that was going to say they couldn't manufacture the first drug any longer, right?
Oh, well, they can't distribute it. You can manufacture anything you want if you just put it in storehouse and don't give it to people. So
Yeah,
right.
It's the sale and distribution that they had to get FDA approval of. So, and that part of the case could withdraw all of that. The FDA, they could take everything off the market, but it is an abortion-inducing drug. The law would take it and other pills off the market. And let me just say something in defense of the Dobbs Court and the Fifth Circuit and the court again. What we want, sometimes they're called conservative judges or liberal judges. I don't like the way conservative, that's just preserving the status quo. But these are faithful judges as opposed to independent judges. Liberals want independent judges who do what they want to and make up the law. Well, if you have 9 people making up the law, that's an oligopoly. It's not a democracy. It's not a republic. Oligopoly is a rule by a small group of people. And
right.
and the people who rule in an oligopoly are called oligarchs. You may have heard about the Russian oligarchs. That's one their people and his friends rule, and everybody who gets to rule is an oligarch. Okay, but a faithful judge is faithful to the written law, whether it be the Constitution, which was ratified by the people of the United States, and from which we get the legitimacy of the consent of the governed under our rule of law. Or if it's a legislature, it's the people's representatives who write the law, not the judges. So a faithful judge follows the law. An independent judge is a usurper or a tyrant of the role of a judge.
Yeah.
And then, Allan, finally, tell us a little bit about your website, and if people want to read more information about the case, and maybe there's some other women listening that want to sign a petition or get involved. Tell us what they can do.
Thank you. Our website is thejusticefoundation.org. And if you're a woman who's had an abortion, we urge you to go through healing programs first. And there are healing programs. These traumas are decades old for some women. With the pill, actually, they're coming out much quicker. So you need to get abortion recovery and then give us your testimony. And if you've already been through recovery or something, give us your testimony. We'll protect your identity, but we'll take your story, your truth, your testimony to courts and legislatures all over the country banning abortion. And we want to make abortion illegal and unthinkable everywhere. You can also sign the Moral Outcry petition on our website. Anyone can sign that. And it's to make abortion illegal in all 50 states. And 2 of the reasons are in this case. 1, abortion is a crime against humanity. It hurts, it kills a human being. Number 2, it hurts women terribly. And 3, there's a safe haven law in all 50 states. No woman has to have an abortion to be free of the burden of parenting. Justice Amy Coney Barrett brought that up from our briefs in the oral argument in Dobbs. So what we want to say is stop killing the children. Don't hurt yourself. Please give us the baby, and we'll give it to the loving homes that have been carefully vetted. Over 1 million families a year waiting to adopt newborn children. So we can make abortion illegal and unthinkable in all 50 states. And you can get all that and free resources at thejusticefoundation.org.
Well, thank you, Allan, for joining us. And of course, we'll have you back again as this case continues to percolate, and we'll keep our viewers informed. So thank you and God bless.
Thank you.
Well, brothers and sisters, a lot to talk about here, but a lot to follow up. First, like Allan said, if you need healing, simple website to go to, abortionforgiveness.com. Go to abortionforgiveness.com. You put in your zip code, and you'll see where the nearest healing program is for you. If you'd like to be involved with Silent No More, go to silentnomore.com. And that's our website for that. And finally, if you want to read more testimonies of people harmed by abortion, go to abortiontestimony.com. We have a beautiful search engine there. You can click off chemical abortion or rape, incest, life of the mother, all the different reasons there. And you will see the trauma, physical damage, psychological damage occurred by these women and why abortion didn't solve their problems and created so many others. Remember, you can be the voice for all of them out there by spreading these testimonies and spreading the damage abortion is doing. Well, thank you for joining us today. As always, pro-life leader Frank Pavone. Great discussion. And you too, brothers and sisters, you need to be involved. And remember, there are some abortions only you will be able to stop, and some lives only you will be able to save. Thank you, and God bless.